Welcome to NSTA Web Seminars, where you can find live interactive learning at your desktop. Today's seminar is titled Engineering Design as a Core Idea. Our presenter is Cary Sneider. My name is Christina Crawley, and I'm going to be moderating today's program. Jeff Lehman is also online with us to provide technical support. Now, before we get started, I'd like to remind you to visit the NSTA Learning Center, your online portal for professional learning and over 11,600 resources for science educators. You'll find that over 4,000 of those resources are free, and you could add them to your library to access when it's convenient for you. You're welcome to organize your resources by bundling them into collections or accessing thousands of other collections made by NSTA and other teachers. Please join the conversation in the community forums where you can discuss content and classroom issues with other teachers. Our online advisors are available to help you find the information you're looking for, and you can use our free tools to help you organize your own professional development and meet your goals. It's all available at learningcenter.nsta.org. Now, I'd like to pass the reins on to our presenters today. We have Cary Sneider, who is an Associate Research Professor in Portland, and he's going to be running the main show of today's web seminar. But we'll have a first introduction from Ted Willard, who is the Director of NGSS at NSTA. So with that, Ted, take it from here.
Thanks very much, Christina. Welcome, everybody. Really excited to see you all in the middle of the summer, spending some time to further polish your craft, get a better understanding of the next generation science standards, specifically this week in regard to how engineering works. So I'm just going to give you a quick little rundown of the standards. This may be old hat for some of you. Some of you probably could present these slides, but I think it's important that we all enter the discussion with a similar understanding. NGSS was developed and was the work of 4 different organizations: the National Academy of Sciences, the Achieve, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and then my personal favorite, NSTA. And there was a 2-step process in the development. There was a framework, there was standards themselves, and then all the different elements: curriculum, instruction, assessment, pre-service education, and professional learning. All of those different pieces derive from the standards. So let's take a quick look at that first piece, the framework itself, and get an understanding of it. The real headline in the framework is the science and engineering practices, the cross-cutting concepts, and the disciplinary ideas. And these 3 dimensions, and the idea of 3-dimensional learning. I hope you've all had a chance to look at the framework at some point. If you haven't, you need to go and look at it. There's no excuse really. You can get a free PDF of it from the National Academies of Press, or you can get a hard copy if you're someone who likes to flip through, fold down pages, underline things, from NSTA Press. So the practices, the real star of the standards, things like asking questions, developing models, using mathematics, engaging in argument. All these different elements are the activities that students need to engage in, the knowledge and skills that they need to really do science. And it's through doing those pieces that they really gain an understanding of ideas. Then we have the cross-cutting concepts: patterns, cause and effect, systems, structure and function. These are things that are not unique to just one discipline, but cut across physics and biology, chemistry, earth science, all these different elements. And then finally we come to the disciplinary core ideas themselves. And it's very important for us tonight to know, in addition to life, earth, and physical science, we have engineering technology, which stands there as a core idea in of itself, and what Cary will be talking about today. Now, each of those core ideas can be further broken down. For example, engineering design is a subset of the set on engineering and technology. Now, all of those pieces were articulated in the framework itself. The folks in developing the standards took that and worked on it. And so the standards were developed by a coalition of states. 26 different lead states were involved, the ones in blue here. And that document was released in 2013. It was worked on by 40 some odd writers. There's a representation of where all the writers came from. And so you can get a sense that it really was a national effort. And at this stage, and we all should give a little shout out for my home state, New Jersey, which adopted NGSS just last week, that we now have 12 states plus the District of Columbia, I like to refer to it as a baker's dozen, that have adopted it. And that represents 29% of the students in the country. So 3 in 10 students right now live in a state that has adopted NGSS. The numbers continue to grow. But let's take a look at what the standards look like. We've got here a single performance expectation. And a real key point in all of this is that a performance expectation is a combination of the practices, core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. But it is a description of what is to be assessed. It is not meant to be instructional strategies or objectives for a lesson. It's not meant to say you must do this thing in your classroom at this point in time. But it does combine all these pieces for the purposes of assessing students at the end of instruction. And so develop molecular models to support explanation, That ties in one practice piece here. The ideas of reactants and products and atoms and mass are conserved as relates to a disciplinary core idea. And then the whole idea of conservation, that matter is conserved because atoms are conserved in physical and chemical processes. That is yet another piece in terms of understanding this performance expectation and how this performance expectation really does manage to look at all of these different elements. And so with that in place at this point, I think we can turn things over to Cary and let him go into engineering and explain how that is a core idea. Off to you, Cary.
I want to start out just by making sure that I can be heard. Christina, Ted, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay, good. And I'm going to make sure that I can advance the slides. Did that advance okay?
Yep.
All right. Okay, everybody. Well, I just want to tell you how delighted I am to be here today. The slide that Ted showed just a few minutes ago of all the people across the country that worked on the next generation science standards, what that experience was like. If you can imagine your dream professional development experience where you had a chance to collaborate for several months with some amazing teachers across the country, that's what it was like. It was really exciting. And we were breaking new ground. Now, to some extent, engineering was in the Science for All Americans, written in 1989, and in the Benchmarks for Science Literacy, and to some extent in the National Science Education Standards. But they never really took root. And the reason they didn't take root is because they weren't fully integrated with the science. So you're going to hear that as a theme from me today about how the core ideas in engineering relate to the core ideas in science. So let me see. Let's say that Elizabeth's proceeded it. And you'll find that the engineering and the next generation science standards actually is woven into the NGSS in 4 different ways. First of all, it's a core idea just like Newton's laws, theory of evolution, processes that shape the Earth and the universe. These are things that we want students to know, to be aware of. So it has the same status as those. But it's also a practice. So the abilities to do engineering design are embedded in those 8 practices. So the first practice in science is asking questions. The first practice in engineering is defining problems. So there's some similarities and some differences that I'll be talking about. And third, they're also related to the cross-cutting concepts. And in particular, a couple of them, which I'll be talking about later, the idea that science and engineering are interrelated, dependent on each other, and that science and engineering affect society and the environment which in turn affects science and engineering. So it's related to cross-cutting concepts, and then it's embedded in all the other disciplines. So when you read these performance expectations that Ted was just pointing out, you'll see that many of them include practices or cross-cutting concepts related to engineering. So it really is woven deeply in the fabric of the NGSS, and that's why it's important for us to discuss today. And I will do the best I can to help you hopefully make some either incremental or a giant leap in your understanding of engineering in the NGSS. And I'll tell you, every time I do one of these presentations and prepare for it, I learn more about how they're embedded in the NGSS. So let's move on. So first of all, let me find out who's out there. I'd like to, Christina will be putting up a poll in a moment to see what level you either teach at or if you're an administrator, coach, or have some other connection with science education. Christina?
Okay, it looks like most people have already started filling out that poll. So again, if you've just joined us, below your name in the participants area there, you have 4 little buttons. There's an A button, which has an A, B, C, D, E. You can choose the answer that applies to you. Maybe we'll give you another 10 seconds or so to work on that, and then I'm going to publish the results on the whiteboard.
I can't wait. Can you show us already? No, I know we have to wait to see.
No, I can do it. But for those of you who if you can try not to use the chat box, use the multiple choice so that we can add your responses into the final poll. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and publish the poll on the whiteboard. Here we go. All right. So let's put this a little bit here so people can still see it, and I'll let you take it from there, Cary.
Okay. So there's a pretty good distribution. It looks like more people, slightly more, are in the administrators, coaches, and others department. So 75% of you are teachers. And of those, 23% are middle school teachers. But we have a few high school teachers and elementary teachers. So I will really make an effort to make sure my comments span the whole width. And so let's go on then. I'm going to advance the slide then. Okay, so what does it mean to say engineering as a core idea? And I'm actually going to spend most of my time about this on this particular idea, because that's what this particular series is about. Often we think of engineering as a process. You engineer something. But to understand what that process is as knowledge, as an important piece of knowledge, it's a little bit different from just knowing how to do it. Now, of course, they both are important. But we'll talk a little bit about what that knowledge is. So remember I mentioned a few minutes ago that it is a core idea along with the others. So these are all of the core ideas. So in the physical sciences, you've got about matter and interaction, energy and so forth. The life sciences, you've got 4 of them. Understanding the structures and processes, understanding ecosystems, heredity, and then evolution. So there are 4 of them there. In Earth and space sciences, there are 3. The first one, Earth's place in the universe, really is about astronomy. Earth systems is how Earth systems interact with each other, formation of landforms, and so forth in Earth and human activity. So as you can see probably already, these are all interrelated, so they aren't standalone. But engineering design is probably more deeply interrelated than any of them, because engineering design, again, is both a practice and a core idea. You'll notice, I don't know if anybody caught this, but Ted showed a list also. It was a 2x2 grid of these same ideas. But his list had 13 of them. Mine has 12. So I do a presentation, which I might do for NSTA sometime, called Where's the Missing Core Idea? So under engineering design, there in the framework, which is the document that provided the vision for the NGSS, there was a second core idea, and that was called Links Among Science, Technology, Engineering, Science, and Society, and the environment. And that's clearly an important idea. In fact, it was interwoven so closely with all of the other fields, we felt that, as we, the writing team, felt that it really could not be, should not be considered a core idea separately. It really has to be integrated to all the other ideas. So it's no longer present as a core idea, but it is present as a cross-cutting concept. So let's move along. And actually, at this point, before we move along, I was asked in preparing this to show what it looks like in the classroom. So we're going to go to a couple of videos and to give you an idea. They're each about, well, the second one's about 5 minutes. The first one is longer than that, so we may not listen to the whole thing. Let me just give you a little background. Both of them are from the Museum of Science in Boston, which actually has been a pioneer in the development of engineering education curriculum, at least the most recent wave of it. So I was there for 10 years, from 97 to 2007, so I was involved in these programs. So not so much in the first one, the elementary one, but in the second one that you'll see. So let's first go to a 5th grade classroom. And these students are learning about magnetism. Of course, magnetism is an area of science, but they're learning about it in the context of an engineering design problem, which is to develop a prototype of a maglev vehicle or train. So, Christina, I'm going to need your help in connecting people with that.
Okay, sure thing. So what I'm going to do, everyone, is I'm going to push this link to you. It's going to open a browser in your on your computer, and it's going to start. It'll either play the video directly, or you'll have to press play. We're only going to watch the first 5 minutes or so. So go ahead and watch that. You'll then hear my voice around, the 5 minute, 10 second point or so, and then we're going to bring you back in the room. So just hang tight. And also, Cary, I am going to put you on mute because you're joining on phone, and then we'll put you back on shortly. Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me over the video. If you want to stop the video, we're going to come back into the Blackboard room. So go ahead, come back, and using the multiple choice button, give me a green check. So where it used to be A, B, C, D, E, you'll see an X or a check. Give me a check to show that you are back in the room. I'm going to unmute Cary's audio, and we're going to let him take it from there.
Get to see the kids yet do their activity. I thought it would move a little bit faster, but let me urge you when you have a chance to go to see this one or some of the other videos on the Engineering's Elementary website. It is simply MOS for Museum of Science, mos.org/EIE. And then if you click on resources, you'll see the videos. And what's interesting about this one is that after the kids get the assignment and they start working, they're trying to figure out the polarity of how they can arrange the poles of the magnets so that they can get their vehicle, which also has magnets on the bottom, to levitate just above that track and go back and forth. And if they arrange the magnets right, then the little car will levitate and will hold the load. They get so involved and engaged once they get started on this. So one of the reasons for including engineering design, of course, is engagement. And in fact, I'd say in previous times, that was the primary reason for doing it. Well, the reason you use engineering design is to get kids interested in having fun, so they're having fun while they're learning, and it's very motivating. But that has changed with the NGSS. The idea is to learn about engineering itself. The teacher was spending quite a bit of time setting up the problem. First of all, there was a linkage to literature, to teaching English. The students had obviously read a book or a story about kids that needed this sort of thing. So there's a real-world context, and there's a client, somebody actually who needs it, who's going to use it. And then she talks about the criteria and the constraints of the problem. And the first phase of it is in the elementary level for engineering is starting to ask questions. So that's why she talked about the ask phase, to try to understand, ask questions to understand, well, what are we trying to accomplish here? What do we want our vehicle to do? What are the constraints? So it's very different from the days in which you would do the egg drop or build a bridge where, okay, we're done science for the week, we've done our hard work, now we're going to have some fun and we're going to do something. So here are some parts, go ahead and make something. It's very different. The students are really learning what are the steps of engineering design. And when I say steps, they aren't actually steps that always take one after the other. Just like there is no scientific method, steps A, B, C, there's no engineering design method, but there is a process. And you don't always follow it in a linear way. Sometimes you go back to the beginning and say, hey, are we asking the right question? So, so what I want to do now is just take you for a few minutes to a high school class and ask you to watch another video. This one is less than 5 minutes, but it's a little bit different. So when Christina gives you, connects your browser with it, it starts off right away without needing to be clicked, but it starts out with a bunch of talking heads. But you will see a menu. Now, on the right side of the menu are 4 pictures. Click on the 4th picture down. Next to it, it says Project 3. And just to give you an idea of what you will be watching is this is a high school curriculum called Engineering the Future. And these students are redesigning a putt-putt boat, which is a little toy boat that was patented back in the 19th century. And they build the boats, trying to figure out how it works. And so the important thing here, where the science and the engineering are connected, is in this case they really have to figure out how the boat functions in order to improve it. So be sure to click right away on Project 4, and we're going to listen to that one from beginning to end. Okay, Christina?
I believe it's Project 3. I think that's the one that we want, right, Cary?
Right. That's right. It's called Project 3, but it's the 4th picture down on the right.
Okay, so I'm going to push that to...
It says Project 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Great. I'm going to push that to everybody. When you have finished watching the video, come back in the room, give me a green check. When we have most of the people back in the room, then I'm going to turn Cary's audio back on. Okay, I'm seeing a rush of green checks in the main box, so maybe we'll just come back to the main room. If you haven't finished the video, if it's okay to press pause and maybe you can have a look at it later, I'm going to turn Cary's audio back on and we are going to continue.
Okay, welcome back. And again, if you'd like to see that again, or if you want to see the other parts of the video, the website is, again, mos.org, museumofscience.org/ETF, for Engineering the Future. And then you'll simply see the video link on the page, and you can just click on that. What I want you to see in that is that this high school group, how intimately scientific inquiry is interwoven with engineering design. So Julie is an especially good facilitator at really engaging the students in discussing their ideas about what's going on, that inquiry process, where she's getting them to argue for their point of view from evidence. And of course, there's more than you saw. They actually draw their sketches and ideas, and then they try different experiments to see who is right. And so, for example, you can block one of the tubes and see that the code still works. So, that inquiry process is really interesting. What is most important is that she listens to their ideas. It's not so much do they get it right as what are they thinking, how are they figuring this out, and then paraphrasing that and sending it back to them so that other kids can take part. Because once, of course, the teacher says the right idea, it's all done. And then using what they figured out in redesigning the boat to make it perform differently. So that's a quick view of what engineering design looks like in the classroom. Now let's take a little more formal look at what is going on. So as a core idea, engineering design has these three major phases. Now, you'll find in different curriculum materials, like EIE sees engineering design in 5 phases. Engineering the Future, the high school level, has 8 phases. And when we wrote the NGSS, we did not want to favor one approach or another. So we kind of grouped them together into these 3 major phases that would agree with just about any curriculum. And that is, in phase 1, is you really have to define the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? What are the criteria and constraints and so forth? How will we know we're successful? Then, developing and testing solutions, you brainstorm ideas. Part of that also is researching how have other people have done this. Coming up with different ideas, and perhaps the most important thing is you don't go with the first idea you come up with, because all of us as problem solvers tend to do that. We know the problem and, hey, let's try this. But in engineering, the idea is to think of a number of different solutions and then compare them to see which would be most likely to meet the requirements of the criteria and the constraints of the problem. And then to test the one that seems most promising, building a prototype, for example. Once you've got a solution, you're not done, because then the idea is to make it better or optimize it. So what that's about is deciding what the most important criterion is. So it might be performance, or it might be cost. When you think of cars, some cars have high performance and high cost. Other cars have maybe slightly less performance and lower cost. You decide what is most important in your product in terms of the people you're doing it for. So this is a cycle, because you always go back to define the problem, or when you've finished and you've got a solution, there are always problems that crop up or new problems to solve. That's the whole concept that we want kids to learn, like theory of evolution. It's a way of thinking about problems, and not just the big problems in the world, but also the everyday problems that we encounter. If our kids can become problem solvers and know how to solve problems, then they'll be much more effective in the world. And if they can use science in solving problems, they're making really evidence-based decisions based on their knowledge about, well, not only the evidence that they see, but what they've learned from their teachers about how the world works. So defining problems is not the same at the kindergarten level as it is at the high school level. And so, for example, from kindergarten to grade 1, or grade 2 rather, defining problems involves asking questions, making observations, gathering information about a situation. But most important is realizing that a situation you want to change is a problem, and problems can be solved. It's a real mindset difference. And young children can do that rather than crying, for example, or asking the teacher to fix things. The problems are things that they can define and they can solve them. And then at the upper elementary level, it gets to be more formalized. They define a simple problem in terms of criteria for success and constraints, or constraints are the limits, and it really has typically to do with materials, time, or cost, what you have to work with. Now, this is the first phase of problem solving, and I'm going to go through it from kindergarten through high school. And then we'll do the same for the next 2 phases. So at the middle school level, they have to define problems more precisely so that it's more likely to ensure a successful solution. And they could need to begin to take into account both scientific principles and any impacts that solving the problem might have. One of the obvious examples is cell phones. Man, cell phones really help people communicate. But used when you're driving a car, they can cause a lot of problems. And then at the high school level, we want students to think not just about the everyday problems, but major global challenges like how do we have enough food for people when in 2050 our planet has not 7 billion, but 9 billion people? How do we solve the problems of famine today around the world or medical issues? So we really want students as they mature to really be taking on and thinking about the problems that they're going to have to solve when they're adults, because these are problems that we haven't solved. We're bequeathing them to our children, so let's at least give them the tools that they'll need to solve them. Okay, so the middle part of it, of the process, is developing and testing solutions. For young children, a simple sketch, drawing, or a model helps them think about how the shape of an object helps it to function to solve a given problem. So at that level, really, it's the idea of let's make a thing that will solve the problem. And sometimes changing the shape of things will help. At the upper elementary level, we want them to generate multiple possible solutions. And as I mentioned, that's the hardest thing to do. Because kids, once they get something, really want to solve it immediately, but keep in mind, so do we adults. And then at the middle school level, you can use a process for evaluating competing solutions, a systematic process. There's one method that's a favorite one of mine called the Pew chart, and where you list all of your different solutions across the top of the page and your criteria along the left side of the page, and then you rate each solution against each criterion. And you can use numbers to kind of calculate what would be the most likely. At the high school level, often these real-world problems are so big and complex that all we can really think of doing is solving a piece of it, solving a water problem in one part of the world, for example. But the idea is to think about all the different parts of a problem, to think about solving it a piece at a time, and at the same time taking into account issues like cost, safety, reliability, even aesthetics and cultural issues, because if an idea is proposed, but people for whom it's proposed aren't interested, it's not going to solve the problem. Now, those of you who are experienced science teachers are probably saying, that's not science, that's social studies. Well, this is where science starts to connect with social studies, language arts, mathematics. Those are real connections, and we don't want our kids growing up saying, not my problem, I do science, or not my problem, I do math. That problems in the real world spill over into other areas, and we'd like them to start getting used to that idea now in their science class. Of course, what that suggests is that in schools, that we want teachers to start collaborating. And I believe that there's already been a lot of that. I know when I was teaching, I remember my middle school experience, it was fabulous. We had a small school. There were like 5 teachers. And our 80 to 100 kids, we were really able to collaborate a lot. And it was a fabulous experience. Of course, in larger schools, it's perhaps more difficult. But science spills over into the other areas, into the real world, and that's really part of the idea. And then optimizing, the last part of it. So for young children, really means, so you compare two different solutions and see which is better. Now, as you go up in grades, that's simply called part of the second phase, which is comparing and improving solutions. But starting at the upper elementary level, kids will carry out pair test or controlled experiments. Or they'll look at failure points on a given structure to try to figure out how to improve it. And then at the middle school level, they might be developing and testing a model iteratively. So the iterative, again, what that really means is doing it again, but in an informed way. So you try something out, you get information, and then you do it again. Now, kids, like the rest of us, again, don't like to do things over again. I just did that. Can't we do something else? But to engineer a solution to a problem, to really solve a problem, usually means trying it out, finding out what was wrong, and then improving it. So that's kind of the challenge for the middle school students and teachers. And then at the high school level, we want students to start using more sophisticated tools like computer simulations, because with a computer, you can try things out under different conditions that you really weren't able to do with a physical model. And then to see the complex interactions of different systems. So that's a little bit about what the core idea of engineering design really means. So here's a question for you. So we're going to stop, and I'm going to ask you this question, and you're going to use your clip art, I think, to enter your ideas in these 3 different phases. Now, again, define means defining the problem. Solve includes the idea of coming up with different solutions and testing them. And then optimize phase is once you've got the solution, improving it. So let's consider the first one. One of the students broke their leg. What do we do about it? All right, place your bets. And down there. There you go. Now, okay, so let's go on to the second one. It's a good solution, but people have to be able to afford it. What do we do? And then the third one, we're missing one of the ingredients for the cookies. What do we do? You know, they all end with what do we do? So let's allow some more bets to be placed there. Well, we have some clusters. We have some exclamation points, meaning, Okay, so first of all, I want to say there's no absolute correct answer to these 3 questions. My expectation when I wrote them, though, is consistent with these 3 clusters. Of course, the first one, we have a problem. A student broke a leg. So we have to define the problem. What do we do? Should we try to fix it? Should we call a doctor? Do we call an ambulance? So what's the problem here? Is the problem to get this person to a medical doctor, or is the problem to immobilize it until we get it there? So, by the way, I love your creativity, everybody. I don't know how someone hijacked an entire cluster and moved it off the page, but it's kind of fun. So the second one, it's a good solution, but people have to be able to afford it. And I agree. Once you've got a good solution, how do you improve it? And in this case, the decision was made that the most important criterion was cost. So that's when you try to improve it by figuring out how you can do some trade-offs, perhaps different materials. And then the last one is we're missing one of the ingredients. What do we do? Well, it's pretty much at the brainstorm stage. You could maybe use something else instead. So instead of wheat flour, you use corn flour. Or you might say, well, instead of making cookies, let's make brownies. So so you know you need to accomplish something, but you don't know how to do it. Okay, that's great. Let's move along. Thank you for all your wonderful artwork. There we go. Now, by contrast, since even though this is all about engineering design as a practice, I want to emphasize that it is also a practice. And this particular picture, by the way, this little girl, it's at a station at a museum where kids are being asked to, invited to blow bubbles and to try all these different tools. There are lots of materials there, little loops of various sorts and straws and pipe cleaners. And this little girl has her own tool. She used her fingers. So she's holding her fingers to make a little O, dipped it in the soap solution, and she's blowing a bubble. And the little boy next to her is saying, wow, I never thought of that. So, she's being very creative in this practice. So in this case, I suppose, she knew what the problem was, and she tried a different solution. So asking questions. Now, there are 8 practices. And again, what I want to do is emphasize the distinction and the similarities. So one of the areas in which they're really the biggest difference, I think, is first practice. And in science, always begins with a question, not necessarily about the natural world. It could be a question about metallurgy or about electricity, circuit electricity, which would be something that people put together. But it's a question. How come it works this way? Engineering begins with a problem. So the goal is different. Answer the question versus solve the problem. The second one, developing and using models, is actually very similar in both. A model is a simplified situation, a simplified model. A simplified representation of something. and you use the model to represent your understanding of it. And of course, every model has its limitations. So it leaves certain things out, for example, but allows you to figure out various things. And in science, you use it to answer your question. In engineering, you use it to help you solve the problem or create a design. But the processes are used in a very similar way. Similarly, planning and carrying out investigations. And you saw a few minutes ago that the high school students were investigating how the putt-putt works in order so they can improve it. This is one of those areas where science and engineering are virtually the same. You might want to do experiments. You might want to do a field study. In any case, you need to know what's going on if you're either going to answer the question or solve the problem. So analyzing and interpreting data. If you've got an investigation, usually you've got a data to analyze. And again, analyze the data to answer the question or to solve the problem. But doing the data analysis is really the same. You're creating graphs, you're measuring, recording data, creating graphs, and then you're interpreting those graphs to understand what they mean in terms of the questions you asked or the problem you're solving. And again, using mathematics and computers, or actually not just computers, but computational thinking, thinking of how you can automate data collection and analysis. So those are similar in both fields. But now we come to another one that's really quite different. Because remember, in science, you started with a question. You want to answer the question, and it usually involves explaining something, how something works, a natural or some sort of phenomenon. So it might be what causes a rainbow. Whereas in science, you have a solution to your problem. You've fixed something, or you solved the problem in some way. So that's, again, this is the sixth practice, and they're quite different. The other two, again, are quite similar, arguing from evidence. So if you think you know what's going on in science, you're trying to, and someone else disagrees with you, that's when you're arguing from evidence. And I think the example we saw of the kids discussing how the putt-putt worked is a really good example of that. And again, if you have an engineering design and all the kids, the different groups in the class have done the problems and they all have different solutions, you're arguing for your particular design and why it's better than the others. Or you're being persuaded that maybe someone else's is better. And then the final one is obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. There is some research that's been reported in the framework, and Ken mentioned to you the framework is the one that kind of has the vision of the NGSS, showing that both scientists and engineers spend nearly half their time reading and writing. So reading other people's papers, writing up your results. So being able to do that is important, but a lot of that time is also spent investigating on the Internet and learning how to evaluate what you see and what you read is really important, especially since anybody can provide information on the Internet. And then communicating and putting those ideas together both visually and with words. So these are, that's the last one. And again, they're very similar in engineering or in science. And that's, think about it, that's why we do engineering and science together. Think of how they really connect together. Because, in fact, think of science, engineering, that's part of your science program. So here are some quick true and false questions. I would never ask true and false questions of students, by the way, if I were really testing them. 50% of questions get them right. So the purpose here is really to get you to think about them. So let's go through the 8 practices, 4 concern inquiry and 4 concern design, true or false. By the way, that came from a situation where somebody actually thought that was the case. So I have it right in here. Second, it's really not important for students to know if they're doing inquiry or design, as long as they can do both. And I'm happy to see that everybody got the message that this is the core idea. And then the last one, the greatest differences between inquiry and design are in practices 1 and 6. Now, that's a little more of a challenge if you weren't counting. But yes, practice 1 is defining problems or asking questions, and practice 6 is explaining or solving the problem. So yeah, I think everybody's been listening. Thank you. Not sure about the 3 checks there. I think that's a bit of a challenge, but again, this last one you had to have been counting the. I'd love to know who's doing the the yellow squiggle here. So we're going to go on. I'm sorry. You'll have to be doodling at your table while you're listening. Okay, so we're moving along now. Okay, so the third dimension is cross-cutting concepts. And the idea is that a cross-cutting concept like energy and matter relates to many different fields. And for kids to get the idea that science and engineering is one field, it's not, you know, genetic engineering versus astronomy versus so on and so forth. There are really connections among all of those, and there are similar ways in which you perceive and think about things. So there are 7 cross-cutting concepts from the framework, and I think you can see what they are here. And then there are 2 others. So these are the 2 from the missing core idea. And that missing core idea about the links among science and engineering, science, technology, engineering, and society and the environment, really breaks down into these 2. And these are considered or used as cross-cutting concepts in the NGSS. So one of them is that science, technology, and engineering are interdependent, and that one supports the other. Now, this is different from the old idea that engineering is just applied science. That concept, of course, it is applied science, but it's much more than that. It's a field in its own right with its own concepts. And just as at the heart of every invention and every technology is some scientific concept, also, in order for science to proceed, you need to have engineers and technology. So engineers create technologies such as telescopes, microscopes, vehicles, all sorts of things that scientists use. And can you imagine doing astronomy without telescopes? So they each move each other forward. And there are also many cases where a particular discovery in science enables a new technology that was never there before. So, for example, radio waves not only enable radios and televisions, but also cell phones and the Internet. And then those accomplishments have enabled so many other sciences to advance. Just think of all the sciences that use computers, for example, or use the Internet. So this is a rather important idea that connects the sciences. And the other one is the influence of engineering, technology, and science on society and the natural world. So this is where we want students to think responsibly. A technological decision has a vast impact. So the decision, for example, in the Eisenhower administration to build a national, cross-national set of roads was an important one that really resulted in the automobile infrastructure we have today. Had the Eisenhower administration decided instead to build trains and use cities as hubs, where there would be smaller vehicles, our life would be very different. Now that may be a hard one for millennials to think about, but certainly think about how life would be different without cell phones. So it affects society, and then issues such as our use of fossil fuels certainly affects the environment. Massive impacts on natural resources, and that's again one of the big issues that our students are going to have to face. So these ideas are prominent in the NGSS. They're not swept under the rug. They're issues that we want teachers to be presenting to students, especially in middle and especially in high school students, I'd say. So here's a question, and about how would you use cross-cutting concepts in your teaching. And so we want you to write a little something. And Christina, can you explain how people can do that?
Yeah, and so for this one, instead of writing on the whiteboard directly, you're going to go ahead and put your comments in the chat box. So if you want to go ahead and start typing there, and if you want to detach the chat box so you can see all the comments as they come in, go ahead and do that.
So while you're writing, by the way, I noticed a question, are there resources out there to help us do this? Starting early next year, Corwin will be coming out with a series of 3 books that I'll be editing with curricula and that really weld or meld engineering and science, one in the elementary, middle, and high school level. Each will have about a dozen different curriculum materials. And each chapter in those books will really describe each of those curricula pretty extensively. So there are lots of materials. Of course, there's also materials on the web, like Teach Engineering, which you can go to and find a lot of activities. But the ones in the books I'm referring to from Corwin Press will be whole curricula covering various grade levels. So let's see what we've got. Oh my goodness. Alternative energy. Technology should not disconnect us from humanity. And I can't read them fast enough. Is there any way we can display them?
You can, if you scroll up a little bit, Cary, you can stop it from automatically scrolling for a second so you can actually read through. You know, anyone in the audience can do that as well.
Okay. All right. Biotechnology and inheritance, every student's favorite thing, cell phone technology. Earthquake-proof building. I love the way I can use the concepts across curriculum, particularly as they apply to social studies and social responsibility. Certain student organizational tools or graphic organizers can help students pull information from text or other sources. The tools can be cross-cutting concept specific and help students organize their thinking around patterns, structuring functions, etc. I would use problem-based learning. All projects, whether science or computer software, can use the engineering process to maximize their effect. I love these ideas. I mean, you guys have been thinking about this a long time, I'm happy to see. Systems and models in watershed education, the influence of engineering, technology, science, and society on the natural world. Perfect. And that's from Lisa Schell, one of my students here at Portland State. PBI is project-based inquiry, is that right? Working with ELA, Special Ed and Science, to submit science experiments to the International Space Station. Wow. In physics, especially solar energy. That's right, it's an alternative energy source. River dam engineering and hydroelectric power. You guys have a lot of great ideas. I have middle school tech engineering teacher, me, helping a middle school science teacher with their lessons. That's great. This is a way that technology teachers can really come into their own because they know this material and they have great facilities to help students build things. Okay, internet security. This is fabulous. I think you really have a lot of wonderful ideas here. I want to make sure there's time for questions, and I have only 7 or 8 minutes. So I'm going to go on to the end of this PowerPoint, and just mention that engineering is embedded in all the other disciplines. So what that means, for example, in physical science, there's a performance expectation saying, apply science and engineering ideas to design, evaluate, and refine a device that minimizes the force on a macroscopic object during a collision. So think about a football player in a football helmet. So the device would be the helmet because football players are always colliding with each other, and you want to minimize the force on the object inside the helmet, i.e. the player's brain. So that's a favorite activity about that. But it could also be, seat belts and ways of minimizing the damage during a collision. So this is worded generally so that you can come up with 1,000 different assessment questions. But what it really assesses is a student's understanding of force and how you can minimize the force. And it's about collisions as well and how forces interact during a collision. So that's the science here, and then the engineering design part. So students need to understand, in order to do this, what engineering design is and how it functions, those three phases, as well as understanding the science in order to perform something, in order to answer a question, or actually, more likely, actually design and build something to show that they understand this. Here's a life science example. Design, evaluate, and refine a solution for reducing the impacts of human activities on the environment and biodiversity. So here again, there's 1,000 different assessment questions, perhaps involving a certain ecosystem, analyzing the ecosystem itself, and trying to understand what the issues are. By the way, these are high school examples. That's the HS in the front of this, and the LS is the life sciences, and 2 is the second core idea there. And then 7, it happens to be the 7th one in that particular standard. But there are similar examples in kindergarten level, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and middle school, of course. So, so you'll find these sprinkled throughout the NGSS. And of course, the third one is going to be Earth and Space Science. And this example says evaluate competing design solutions for developing, managing, and utilizing energy and mineral resources based on cost-benefit ratios. So we saw, you're looking right now at the chat window, alternative energy concepts and problems, solar power, and then comparing those with other types of power generation. So it's evaluating those competing solutions and realizing that those comparisons are not always simple. A cost-benefit ratio is one way of doing that sort of comparison. And of course, what you call a cost and what you call a benefit isn't just money. There are environmental impacts that are costs, for example. Okay, so we are, that's the end of my presentation, and I think we have a good 20 minutes for questions, or something near that anyway. So let's use the chat window, but I'm going to ask Christina if you wouldn't mind monitoring that, because when I'm answering a question, I'm not going to be paying attention to the chat.
Actually, Cary, I'm going to take those for Christina, and I agree to this. And we've got one question already locked up here. Peter, who's a middle school teacher, he's teaching middle school technology and engineering. He only has students for 20 classes in a 60-day trimester each year, and he's wondering whether his district really needs to restructure the middle school science department to include him in his engineering work to do what NGSS is advocating.
Well, the answer is yes. I actually spent a few days with some technology teachers middle school technology teachers in New York, and we're working on developing some particular units. One is about food and the other is about water, using the technology teachers' talents and facilities to help students think about how you can purify water and or provide more purified water, or grow food in new ways, because as the population grows, those two are going to become more and more important issues. And in parts of the world, they're already terribly important issues today. The point is that there is a great opportunity here for technology teachers to work with science teachers, because science teachers are not really familiar with the engineering. It's kind of new for a lot of teachers, although I'm very happy to see from your ideas that many of you have been thinking about this already. And it's just a wonderful opportunity. When I was living in Beverly, Massachusetts, we had a science teacher and a technology teacher working together, and that was at the high school level. Because science teachers also don't have the facilities to have kids build things, typically in their classroom, whereas a technology teacher does. I know in many states there are fewer and fewer technology teachers as schools have, as budgets have cause schools to reduce their facilities and their offerings, but I really hope that comes back because technology teachers have a tremendous amount to offer, especially connected with these standards. Next generation science standards, by the way, do not mean that only science teachers should teach them. Certainly at the elementary level, all teachers will teach them as well as their other subjects. But even at the middle and high school levels, the idea is that, science teachers should be helping to teach the Common Core standards in math and ELA, just as the, say, social studies teachers and technology teachers should be helping with science. The point is that these are standards that all students should accomplish. And the more teachers can work together on that, the better. Ted.
So sort of a related question here from Sophia. I hope I'm interpreting it right. She's wondering, do you suggest that in middle school that departments are set up so that, one subject is taught in 6th grade, one 7th, and one in 8th, or should it be mixed up? The standards provide in the appendices examples of both types of things, but I don't know if you have specific suggestions.
Well, each state, the reason, by the way, we went by grade bands in middle school is because different states have different requirements. Actually, in many cases, they're legislated. The legislature decides. And some states have, like life science in grade 6, physical science grade 7, earth and space in grade 8, or the reverse or some other combination of it. Whereas others require all 3 of those subjects, and now all 4 subjects, including engineering design, every single year. My personal preference is the integrated version because, you can't really do one subject without another, and it allows you to emphasize the cross-cutting concepts and to show how they're related to the different sciences. Also, kids like variety. And sometimes kids who love life science don't want to wait 2 or 3 years to get something on life science. But, there are many reasons for doing it other ways. The argument for keeping it in one subject per year is so that you can go into greater depth. So I can't really come down on one or the other. I would personally like to see more specificity grade by grade, because I think at the elementary level it really makes things very clear when you're developing curriculum. I've had spent half my life, 2/3 of my life doing curriculum development. When you develop something that works well at 6th grade, it doesn't necessarily work well at 4th grade and 8th grade. So it makes much clearer targets. If I were developing an energy unit, for example, for a 6th grade and 8th grade, it would be quite different. So one day I'd like to see grade by grade, and it's not as important to me whether the subjects are divided that way, but I prefer to see them integrated.
So we'll throw one more piece here. I'm going to kind of merge 2 together. Cary, what are your thoughts on engineering contests and competitions and grading students based on their success or failure? And so there was also a question that I asked, I think somewhat related, is are there any particular templates you'd recommend for engineering design challenges?
Okay, so first of all, many kids are motivated by these competitions. And the one that I was familiar with, of course, was the science fair. And now in most states, it's called the Science and Engineering Fair. The big one nationwide is the entails Science and Engineering Fair. And more and more states are realizing that you have to use different criteria in judging them, because actually, a student may have come up with an amazing invention that solves a problem but doesn't have a controlled experiment part of it. So these fairs are wonderful, but there are many other competitions now. I just did a recent study and came up with 30 or 40 of them. And there are many different sorts of competitions. Some of them are team competitions. Some of them are in writing, for example, like the Explorer Vision competition, where kids come up with inventions, but they don't actually make the thing, they just describe it and what it might be. and so forth. So I just think they're a wonderful opportunity to get kids motivated. But I would not, when you associate grades with them, some of the baggage that grading has comes along with it. And one of the things that kids worry about, of course, is failure. I'll try something. I'll do something simple so I can succeed rather than doing something difficult so that where I might not succeed. So you have that problem where we want kids to undertake challenges. The other point, of course, is that there's no such thing as failure in engineering. I think Tom Kelly from the IDEO engineering or design firm said, fail early and often to succeed sooner. So you want your model to fail so that the real bridge or the real airplane doesn't fail. But there's failure in another sense. You get started and you give up. Or you just decide, I spent, weeks of time and it just didn't work and I'm going to quit. That's a different kind of failure, and that's the thing that you really, really want to avoid. Ideally, I like the idea that kids have an intrinsic reward in doing it, that it's fun to do. It's okay to require students to do things, especially if they're working in teams. But if you're doing that, you have to have some rules and ground rules for how teams need to work together. So it's not a simple question. I do like the competitions. There are a lot of robotic competitions, but there are other kinds of competitions as well. There's creativity competitions.
That's great.
There's a website called Zozuda, Z-O-Z-U-D-A, I think it is, or ZOZUDE.org. It has a long list of competitions, and that's where I would suggest you go to find something.
Thanks.
Next.
So what we're going to do now is, since we're getting close to the end of our time, is I'm going to go through and mention a few other NSTA resources and upcoming events NSTA's got. Then we'll give folks some time to fill out their survey and evaluation of the web seminar. And then we've got still some time for more questions after that for folks who want to stay and ask some more pieces. So feel free to pose some other questions there that we'll try to get to after we've given you some time to also fill out the survey. But right now what I'd like to do is just sort of mention a couple pieces here. Obviously you can find the Next Generation Science Standards at nextgenscience.org. I also would refer you to the NGSS at NSTA Hub. You can get to it at nsta.org/NGSS, which is a resource, a digital destination for all things NGSS. And you can find links to many of the things I'm pointing to here. We also have a member-only listserv about NGSS and a discussion forum in the Learning Center dealing with NGSS, so that's a great way. We've had some great conversations going on in the chat today. We can continue those conversations in those forums. We've got a couple more web seminars coming up over the next few weeks. 1 week from today, same bat time, same bat channel, will be The Nature of Science in NGSS with Norm Letterman, and then Evaluating Resources for NGSS, the Equip rubric, with Brian Reiser and Joe Kraychek presenting on that topic. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all at those events too. All these web seminars, including today's, are archived. You can see there we did practices in the fall of 2012, cross-cutting concepts, disciplinary core ideas, and pieces on assessment. You also can find lists of a bunch of articles that have been specifically written by Cary and others about NGSS in the various NGSS journals, which I encourage you to look at those. We're very excited about our second virtual conference here at NSTA, Connecting Literacy and Science with NGSS and the Common Core. That's Wednesday, August 6th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And shift out, where we will have a full day devoted to thinking through how these two areas are related and some strategies for pulling different pieces together. So I'm really looking forward to this. Hope to see a lot of you folks there. This fall we'll have some web seminars focusing on the elementary grades, starting off with kindergarten on September 17th. You'll find some more information about that coming up, but you can start to pencil those in on your calendar. All of those will be taking place on Wednesday nights from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. A lot of great books. Obviously the framework and the standards themselves I've mentioned. NSTA has some reader's guides to both books. We also have a book translating NGSS for the classroom, and we've got another book which I forgot to put on the slide about working on NGSS and professional development, a set of activities for PD. There's an app for that. NGSS has one as well, and you can find the NGSS app, and so you can have the standards at your fingertips anytime you want. We've got our fall conferences coming up, all of which have different events around the standards. Richmond, Orlando, Florida, Los Angeles, and all of those places will have quite a few different resources, particularly California, I'd point out, as a state that's already adopted the standards. A lot of opportunities there to learn more. Our national conference is coming up next spring in Chicago, and our STEM forum in Minneapolis. Those will also have some important information. And then down the line, a year from now, in your corner of the country, we get all over the place, so be ready for those pieces. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Christina to close things out of the formal piece and to tell you how you can fill out your survey. Off to you, Christina. And I think Christina's having some trouble with her mic. We will get posted up is the link to the survey. I'm just going to also go here and just thank you.
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now. Great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. I could see that there's a little bit of a lag. But before we do go on, we'd like to thank both of you, Ted and Cary, for your great presentation today. So why don't we get our stamp back? I've given you access to put smiley faces all over the whiteboard. So why don't everybody go for it and give a huge thank you to everyone for the great job. All right. You guys are experts at this. I figured this was the best way to say thank you for everything.
Well, thank you, everybody.
They keep on coming. They keep on coming. All right, huge job. And really, thanks so much, Cary, for leading most of the session. That was really excellent. Great. And I'm going to switch to our next slide. Okay, great. So I'm going to turn that off for a second, and we're just going to switch next to our next slide here, which is going a little bit funny, but a huge thanks to the Carnegie Corporation of New York for sponsoring today's web seminar. Huge thanks to them that we had all of you, over 200 people, 250 people come to today's seminar. And also, of course, to NSTA, to the direction of NSTA, as well as the web seminar team. So we've got both Flavio and Jeff here with us today, and as well as Ted. So it's really great to have you guys getting all this together, putting so much work into getting these seminars through. And of course, related to today's presentation, you're going to be able to find resources linked to the seminar in the collection of the NSTA Learning Center. So I'm going to find that collection link and share that with you again, but it's going to include the archive to the web seminar as well as the presentation slides. The collection may also include journal articles and lesson plans, also interactive content modules, things called science objects and packs, which are a huge feature of the Learning Center, as well as other links to helpful websites and multimedia. So hang tight for that link. We're going to put that in the chat box for you. And also, everyone who has registered for today's program is going to receive an email with the next couple of days, and it's going to give you all those links, including the collection link. And then also, we mentioned this at the beginning, but here is a look at what's coming up on the web seminar calendar. So go ahead and go to learningcenter.nsta.org/webseminars. And that's going to give you the whole list of what's coming up next week and the week after. And so if during your summer break you're able to spend some time on that, we'd love to have you back, especially for those of you who are joining us for the first time. We'd love to see you again. And with that, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for all your smiley faces all over the screens and for your feedback, for your questions, and all of your comments. And we look forward to seeing you again at another NSTA web seminar.